Introduction to AWS B2.1, Standard for Welding Procedure and Performance Qualification. Gary A. Pace, PE, CWI, Katy, Texas. Okay, so what are codes for? We're going to just kind of get into AWS B2.1 because, I don't know, this is kind of a project I've been trying to think about for a while, and I'm going to try and explain it and when this one might be proper use. So the ASME Section 9 is for qualification of welding procedures and qualification of personnel for pressure vessel type situations when pressure is trying to get out. So if you look in the scope of these codes, there's a pretty defined scope of when these codes should be used. Section 9 is not a design code, and Section 9 allows for the use of a lot of materials such as titanium, carbon steel, stainless steels, and aluminum alloys. And I'm setting this up. I'm explaining what Section 9 is and D11 and some other codes, and then we'll loop back into when would be the proper time to use AWS B2.1. So the structural codes that are written by the American Welding Society, for the most part, are for forces pushing down on something. We're fighting gravity. So AWS D11 is a self-contained code. It's for structural steel. D1.6 is for structural stainless steel. D2.1, AWS D2.1.2, excuse me, is for aluminum. 1.3 is for structural sheet steel. D1.4 is for rebar. Anyways, there's a whole list of these welding codes that are written and produced by the American Welding Society. And for the most part, they contain design information, and they're for fighting gravity. So for AWS D1.1, it uses only carbon steels. And there's other codes that are written by the American Welding Society that, as I have stated, are for aluminum, stainless, sheet metal, sheet steel, and reinforcing bar. These codes don't cover as wide a scope of materials as ASME Section 9. So here's the ASME codes, construction codes, and reference documents. So the way the American Society of Mechanical Engineers writes their codes, we've got reference documents, which would be like Section 2, which is all our materials, Section 5, which is NDE, Section 9, which is for welder qualification and welding procedure qualification. And then we've got all our construction codes, that tell us, give us all the information and design criteria if we're going to build, pressure vessels, pressure piping, nuclear components, whatever it is we're going to build. That's where our design information comes from. That's where the design engineers are going to dig through there and figure out how thick the walls have to be or whatever it is they've got going on. So when we switch back to the American Welding Society, here's a whole list of codes. Right? And you can see up there at the top, we've got AWS B2.1, Specification for Welding Procedure and Performance Qualification. And then we've got all these other codes that are, most of them end up having some design criteria in them and some instruction in regards to the do's and don'ts of welding. Here's a whole nother list of them. Industrial machine, mill crane welding, rotating elements of equipment, D14.6, a whole slew of these that are printed by the American Welding Society. Here's a list of the ASME boiler and pressure vessel codes. So let's say we have a machine and it doesn't have, and there's no code that goes with it. I don't know, whatever our widget is, our Rube Goldberg machine, our perpetual motion machine, whatever it is we're building, there's no code that goes with it. It doesn't fall into the scope of AWS D1.1, which is structural steel, or it doesn't fall under something that's made by the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, pressure piping, or power boilers or some unfired pressure vessel or whatever. Something we've got a situation where our components, product, whatever, doesn't fall into the narrow scope of one of those codes that we talked about. Well, we've got our widget, and then let's say our customer, we're making our components, and our customer wants a WPS and a PQR and welder qualification test records. That's what they want. Well, they want to buy our object, our components, but they need some paperwork that says, hey, this thing was welded by qualified welders and that we went through some kind of process to build a WPS and it's backed up by Procedure Qualification Records and that our welders are qualified. So this is where AWS B2.1 comes in. We can use AWS B2.1 to qualify a WPS and a PQR. Perfectly acceptable to do this. We'll get into a little more depth in this here. Or let's say we have a situation where codes don't apply. We need to do a repair procedure, and our customer, like in the previous slide, wants us to come up with a welding procedure specification and procedure qualification records for our welders to make a repair procedure on some component that doesn't strictly fit in some type of code situation, that isn't a pressure vessel, or this isn't a something that falls into AWS D1.1, the structural code. We need to find a way to have paperwork to show our customer that says, hey, yeah, we've done some test plates, we've done some test coupons, we've tested our welder, our practice, the welding that we're going to be doing is supported by us being able to show that there is materials testing that backs up what we're going to be doing in production or the repair side of things. And this is where we're getting into, what if my product doesn't match a welding code? So a friend of mine, he calls this AWS B2.1. He calls it Section 9 Light. If you get into these two codes and start reading through them, there's a lot of verbiage and a lot of the material in there is pretty similar. A lot of what is said in AWS B2.1 is pretty similar to what you'll see in ASME Section 9, but it's kind of a thinned down version, and it's for use in situations other than boilers and pressure vessels. ASME Section 9 is built it is built to be used with the boiler and pressure vessel codes. Section 9, AWS B2.1 is a much lighter and thinned out version of that, but it's the same theory and practice in regard to the process that you're going to use to qualify your welder and your welding procedures. So I'm going to just kind of scan through a few of those welding codes that I touched on before, and it tells us that we can use qualification from other standards. So in 632 of AWS D1.6, which is a structural stainless steel welding code, qualification in accordance with other standards, welding procedures qualified in accordance with AWS B2.1 specification are acceptable for use in this code. So if we qualify our welding procedures in accordance with AWS B2.1, we can use them in AWS D1.6. That's what this is telling us. And I'm going through this exercise and explaining this to show you that the American Welding Society, I didn't just pull this AWS B2.1 out of thin air and it's never referenced, or this is a Gary Pace thing where I'm telling you, hey, you can use this. No, I'm just showing you some places where this document is referenced in some of these big boy welding codes. So AWS B2.1, this specification, like I said, it's pretty similar to ASME Section 9. It's the intent that this specification be referenced by other documents such as codes, specifications, contracts, quality control, and quality assurance manuals. That's what this document's for. This document is for places where another code doesn't really fit, and then we can reference this one, and we can use this to qualify our welders and qualify our procedures. As I've said before, it's pretty much AWS B2.1 is ASME Section 9 Light. It's pretty close. Specification for procedure and performance qualification. And then Section 9 is welding and brazing procedures, welding brazers, and welding brazing operators qualifications too. And I think it's for gluing stuff. But they're pretty similar. I know I'm beating that horse to death, but anyways. AWS B2.1 is also referenced in AWS D1.2, the structural aluminum code. Same thing. If we qualify a welding procedure or welders according to AWS B2.1, we can use them in AWS D1.2. The same with AWS 9.1. There's the same wording in there that says, hey, if you qualify a welding procedure in B2.1, you can use it in AWS 9.1. But this is on a code by code basis. This doesn't work for AWS D1.1. AWS B2.1 is also referenced in 14.1, which is a specification for welding of industrial and mill cranes and other material handling equipment. 14.2, we see similar wording. Shall be in accordance with specification for welding procedure performance qualification. So yeah, I'm just trying to beat a dead horse here, but to show you that B2.1 is referenced in a lot of different places. So now that we've kind of laid out that this is a legit code and I didn't just invent it last week, let's talk about AWS B2.1, the layout. This is what the layout looks like. General requirements, and then there's the scope, normative references, terms and definitions, procedure qualifications, performance qualifications. So this is laid out like almost all of the other AWS codes, but you'll notice that after we get to performance qualification, there's no inspection, nothing to do with inspection or fabrication or any of that. This document is strictly for welding performance and procedure qualification. There's no fabrication, inspection, any of that other stud welding criteria or whatever that we would see in some of the other AWS codes, like AWS D11, 12, 13, 16. Similar layout, but it just stops after Clause 5 performance qualification. So before we dive into M numbers, I'm just going to talk about P numbers. So you might have come across P numbers. I think I've got another video where I talk about P numbers. Well, P numbers is how the American Society of Mechanical Engineers groups base materials. So all the steel alloys are between 1 and P number 15F, I think is the range. And they add on to these or whatever, but 1 through 15F is our ferrous alloys, basically iron. Aluminums are 21 through 26, copper and copper base alloys are 31 through 35, nickel 41 through 49, titanium is 51 through 53, and then zirc and zirconium base alloys are 61 and 62. So the reason why the ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers, did this is so that you wouldn't have, with all the different base materials out there, this is so you wouldn't have to write 530 different welding procedures. You can just, if I qualify one P number to weld another P number, I'm good to go for all the P numbers in that. If I go P1 to P8, I can use any material that's in P1 and weld it to any other material in P8. And that's kind of the simple version of it. There's a little more nuance to it if there's certain situations arrive in impact testing. But for the most part, the codes did this to limit or help keep under control just the sheer volume of welding procedures that you would need. Because most P1 materials are metallurgically pretty close to each other. P8 materials, austenitic stainless steels, same thing. They're all pretty close to each other metallurgically, so the code recognized, hey, they're all pretty close. You weld one, you can weld them all. You're not going to screw it up. You're not going to mess it up. So that's P numbers. So if you look in ASME Section 9, there's a table that looks like this, and it's got all your P numbers. And this table is, I want to say, 100 pages long or something. It's a ginormous table. It is a very large table. So this is where our P numbers come from. So when we talk about M numbers, because, okay, so a designation used of base metals to produce procedure and performance qualification consisting of P numbers and S numbers established by ASME Boiler and Pressure Vessel Code Section 9. But this also has materials not recognized or used under ASME rules. So that list we just looked at, that table we just looked at, those are all code approved materials that we can use to make boiler and pressure vessels. Well, there's a lot of other materials out there that aren't approved or listed on that list, on that table. So there's a lot of other materials that can be used to make other stuff, but they're metallurgically similar or whatever. So we needed some kind of grouping. Same theory, M numbers. So we can keep our number of our welding procedures to a minimum. So the M numbers includes all of our P numbers, but then there's additional materials that get an M number also. So that's what we've got with M numbers. Then we've got an S number. S number's got a couple of different ways of going. It used to be in ASME Section 9, and it was a P number, but I think they had to do with pipe work for B31 pressure. So they about 10, 15 years ago in 2009, they killed S numbers. But there's another group of S numbers that you might run across that if you're doing NAVC, the U.S. Navy, U.S. military, they've got S numbers. So S1 is carbon steel, and then you get to the S21s, aluminums, S30s are the coppers, nickels are 42, 43, 44, titanium and titanium alloys are 51, 52, 53. So you can see that there's some overlap, but there's some differentiation. So if you see a P number, an S number, or M number, they're just material grouping numbers. That's all they are. It allows us to have write a welding procedure and use an M number or a P number and say, okay, I'm going to do M number 1. That's all the carbon steels. Or I'm going to do P8 materials, which are austenitic stainless steels, your garden variety 316L stainless steels. So with procedure qualification, now we're going to talk about Clause 4 in AWS B2.1. I'm not going to talk about normative references in the introduction and the first 3 definitions. We're gonna dive into qualification. So this is 4.1. So it's telling you we've got a couple of different, each welding procedure shall be qualified. This is telling us what's going on. So, and it tells us in 4.1.2, this standard establishes two categories of qualified welding procedures. Category 1 is a standard welding procedure specification. You might have seen this in SWPS. And this is supported by a PQR and reviewed and validated at the Welding Research Council. This is AWS, American Welding Society stuff. So if you need a welding procedure on a specific type of material and you don't want to qualify it, you can call up AWS, the American Welding Society, or look on their website, and they've got a whole laundry list of these SWPSs, Standard Welding Procedure Specifications. So then you don't have to go through and qualify a weld procedure. You can just use one of theirs, weld the material, you're good to go. A lot of the American Welding Society codes allow you to do this. ASME Section 9 allows you to do this under some limitations. Okay, so then we get to Category 2, which is Welding Procedure Specifications. These are qualified by the employer. This is you. If you're using this code book, AWS B2.1, this is where you fall in. You're going to qualify a test coupon, do some bend tests, do some tensile tests, and you're going to write a WPS just like you would in ASME Section 9. So we've got a little flow chart here we're going to look at. And this comes out of AWS B2.1. And up at the top it says, okay, evaluate the production needs and determine if suitable SWPS. So we look at the American Welding Society website, and we see if we can use one of these, or if we even want to use one. If yes, we buy one, we issue it to our welders, and we go to work. And then the rest of that decision tree is we've got to qualify a weld procedure, and then we got two different ways we can go on that. We can do a simulated service or prototype test weldment, or just for a standard weld test weldment. And then we're going to do procedure qualification test weldment, and then we just work our way through this test, or through this little matrix here, this little flow chart. And then at the end, we write a WPS. Okay, so let's say and I'm just kind of cherry picking to keep this video somewhat short. So let's say we have a PQR, or we've done some other testing. We've done a procedure qualification record from a previous, another code. This allows it. So just as long as all the test results meet all the requirements of this specification, and if all the requirements are not met, another qualification test may be conducted following the qualification of the original PQR. A PQR supplement shall be prepared to document the additional test results. So what this is telling us is if I've got an ASME Section 9 PQR, a procedure qualification record done to ASME Section 9, and I want to write a welding procedure to AWS B2.1, I can use that procedure qualification record if all the variables match up. So this AWS B2.1 gives you a lot of flexibility in this regard. Okay, so on a previous slide, when I talked about standard welding procedure specifications, we talked about, you could call up AWS and they'd send you one of these. You send them some money, buy them online, download the PDF, follow the instructions, and you can use it. This is a site license. This is GTAW of PM/P22 material to M/P22 material, 18 gauge through 10 gauge, ER 4043 or R 4043, as welded condition with or without backing. I don't know how many of these the American Welding Society has, but they've got whole stacks of them. There's a significant quantity of these types of standard welding procedure specifications. So it's just telling you, hey, you can use these. This is the documentation that tells you that you can use these. Um, Prior to the use of a SWPS, the employer shall signify acceptance of the responsibility for the production application of the procedure by signing and dating. So you just follow the rules, and you can use these. And your client's got to buy off on it and everything. But in certain situations, this could be an economical way to go. The American Welding Society, like I said, has a whole laundry list of these things. So if we go further down, um, welding variables shall not be changed. If we're going to use one of these SWPSs, we can't change the variables beyond what it says in there. We can't use 2 or 3 of these and stack them together to make a different production weld. You know, if I've got 2 different SWPSs, I can't mix and match these. I can't use them on the same weld joint. I can't use them. I can't mix and match an SWPS with a welding procedures, a WPS that I have written. I can't use one that I already have and then get one of these AWS ones and mix and match those. That's against the rules. And I can't use my own PQR to modify an SWPS. So I can't, an SWPS is a standalone document. We don't mess with those. So then we go on down a little further into AWS B2.1. It's got a thickness limitation for plate and pipe, for groove welds, for procedure qualification. You can see this looks a lot like a similar table in ASME Section 9, and there's a similar table in most of the AWS D1.1 and D1.3 and D1.6 type codes. They all have a table like this. This is much simpler than ASME Section 9, but you can see there's a lot of similarities if you're an ASME Section 9 type person. Then it's got in the code, it's got in B2.1, there's a bunch of information like any of the other welding codes. It's going to tell you when you run a test plate, you know, where to cut out your tensile tests and your bend tests and your face bends and your root bends and all that. So it's pretty much, you know, like ASME Section 9, but just a lighter, leaned out version of that document. And then it's going to, you know, weld test weldments. You know, we need to, when we weld them, we got to have, you know, enough material for the test specimens. Sometimes you might have to do multiple welds to get enough material. But this is the kind of stuff that's written into this welding code. There's a list of essential variables, and this is all broken out by the welding process. You can see up there across the top, we've got the various different welding processes, and then it's just going to, as you work your way through, it's going to tell you exactly what information you need to have on your WPS. This is the part of the document that drives what we're going to have to, the information we're going to need to address on our WPS and our procedure qualification test record. For performance qualification, this is the scope of Clause 5, performance qualification. Purpose of welder qualification is to determine the ability of welders to produce sound weld in the welding test positions. So that's what we're doing here. And this is, if you use this document as your welding code, like I said, if you've got some kind of situation where you're making a product that doesn't fall into another welding code, and your client wants a welding procedure and a welding procedure, a PQR, and welder test qualification records, this is what we're doing. And this is super similar to ASME Section 9. So, and of course, we've got ourselves a little decision matrix, a little flow chart. You know, what do we need to do Can we use a workmanship test? Can we use a performance qualification by a standard test? And then we just work our way through our little flow chart and get to the end. And we've got to approve the performance qualification test record. But all this information is in B2.1. We've got the standard tables on position limitations for performance tests. And I'm not going to go through all of this. I'm just giving you an idea of what's in the document and showing you that it's pretty similar to ASME Section 9. And there's a lot of similarities with AWS D1.1 and some of the other AWS welding codes. One of the things is we can do our welder qualification by a standard test, and this is the one that tells us we can do it. Acceptance of the weldment. There's some criteria, examination procedures and acceptance criteria, and it tells us the number of bend tests and all of that. Like any other welding code, it's going to line us out and tell us what is expected of us. Or we can do, here's one that's a little different from some other codes, because once again, this code covers, it's designed to be used in situations where another code might not cover it. So it gives you a lot of leeway, and it allows us to do qualification or by workmanship tests. So we can go through there, and here's some examples. This picture is right out of the code, AWS B2.1. And you can see that, we're workmanship type stuff. And, other tests or examinations may be specified by the referencing document, whoever the client is, or maybe our internal document. And these are some of the typical workmanship test weldments that one might use. And then here's the allowable base metals for performance qualification. And this is a table that's similar to ASME, one you'd find in ASME Section 9. So this tells me that if I qualify my welder and they weld, the base material they weld is M1 through M11 or M34 or M41 through 47, they can qualify on all these other materials. So this table is pretty similar to one that you would find in ASME Section 9. And I'm going to wrap this up here. And this basically boils down to, if the customer wants a WPS or a PQR or welder qualification test records, and there's no other code that'll fit it, a lot of times this is the direction you can go. This is an American Welding Society document. It's been around for decades. It's referenced in other welding documents produced by the American Welding Society. It's a legit document and a legit way to qualify WPSs and PQRs in situations that don't fit other welding codes. And hopefully it'll get you a happy customer and get your documentation packages approved. You might have to do a little talking and explain what AWS B2.1 is, but hopefully you'll be able to get that accomplished. And like I said, this is a code that we use when other codes don't apply. When we need to fix something that doesn't fit into another welding code, then we can use this one and put together a repair procedure or a manufacturing procedure that fits our situation but might not fit into another welding code. And, final one, just remember B2.1 is more or less ASME Section 9 light. It's very similar, but it's just used for other codes and really oddball situations where you might not have another code that fits it exactly. So this is a way you can look like a grown-up, a professional, a welding and joining professional, and you can show your customer, client, hey, we've got welding procedures. They're done in accordance with this specification, but they really don't fit in another code. Questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, You can contact me, Gary A. Pace, PE, CWI, Katy, Texas, TexasWeldingEngineering.com, gpacex@gmail.com.